Sexual violence against children is a global pandemic. 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 13 boys experience sexual violence. It happens everywhere and across all socio-economic groups, with devastating and lifelong consequences on individuals, their families, and society. But it does not have to be this way. Sexual violence against children is preventable. We spoke to a range of experts from around the world to find out how.
If I look at the last 16 years that I've been working on this issue, I feel today seems more hopeful, more exciting than ever before.
In a couple of countries, the political leaders have started to get it. In a couple of countries, the society is saying, no more, right? So what gives me hope is that if we have the right leaders and we have the right ingredient in terms of programming, we can make a change. Because no nation on earth, no society believes in sexual violence against each other.
We're at a pivot point in terms of the opportunity that we have to take available technologies and bring them to a global scale, from the local level to a national level to a global level. We're at the precipice of that possibility.
But how do we move from possibility to reality?
We need to make this a political issue. The movement building work that's now happening like it's never happened before is essential to make sure that inaction is not an option.
We need to measure the returns on the investment, the interventions, and to make sure that we're able to convince government that this is an area they should invest in, that this is a policy good that their voters want. We need to get the societies in these countries to demand this of their government, to demand that any network, any private sector, any CSO should support them.
Survivors, people with lived experience of childhood sexual violence, are at the forefront of efforts to make ending child sexual abuse a global political priority. They are unwavering in their demand that societies pay attention and that leaders adopt the policies and commit the resources necessary to prevent and combat sexual violence against children.
I'm excited to see how we're starting to move the needle into involving the voices of survivors. It is nothing about us without us. When we start using our own experience and people start listening to what we actually need, it makes a huge difference. When you invest in providing healing and justice and actually deal with those children, they become the most strongest advocates to end child sexual violence, because it's not about a job, it's not about a salary, it's about a cause. It's to make sure that no one else suffers what you've suffered. And I see all the youth that we work with that once were so broken are now standing in the door of the governor and saying, we're not moving until you listen to us. Not because anybody's paying them, not because it's their job, it's because they believe that they can transform this generation.
It's a critical time period right now in which we can continue to gain momentum in creating lasting change or completely lose it. There's been crisis after crisis globally within sport as survivors have found the strength and courage to speak up and give up their privacy and sometimes their careers in order to tell their truth. We need to keep the movement at the forefront of the public and world leaders' attention in order to continue that momentum that we have. Because if we don't, then it's going to take another crisis for it to become a priority again. And those survivors don't deserve to be victimized. And no child should ever have to experience abuse.
But for advocacy to lead to long-term change, we also need a few more things: research, strategies for scaling, financial resources, and true collaboration.
We've had 35 years of testing child physical abuse and neglect prevention programs. There's over 50 that have been validated. Over 50 programs to prevent child neglect and child physical abuse. That took 35 years to get to, and lots and lots and lots of money and time and talent. So in 30 years, I think maybe we'll have 50 programs, but I think in 5 or 10, we'll have a strong stable of effective programs that can be implemented around the world, that are not only for wealthy countries or wealthy places within wealthy countries, but that will be scalable and can be disseminated and adopted and used in all different kinds of places of the world.
The other really exciting thing is that we have evidence of services and programs that not only prevent child sexual abuse, but have other important outcomes as well, that improve education, improve health outcomes, reduce HIV incidents, improve children's and young people's life opportunities. And that provides a gateway to bring policymakers in, even those for whom this may not be their priority, but to say that we can provide social protection, we can provide sexual and reproductive health services, we can provide parenting programs, and those will get you a whole range of outcomes that every government wants, and they will also prevent child sexual abuse. That's a game changer.
But the challenge we have now is that the problem is growing quicker than the solutions are able to meet them. So we need to find a way to significantly scale quickly and effectively to close the gap between the problem we're trying to solve and the solutions that we have available to us at the moment.
The other problem the sector has is a lack of systems thinking. We embrace programs which we know exist, and there's lots of interesting, good programs about how men's behavior can be transformed on the individual level or the family level or even the community level. I think what the sector is just beginning to do is think about these things on a systemic level. So scale, scale, scale.
This is sorely underfunded field. In the past few years, we have seen a lot of commitments from governments and policymakers that have improved the protection of children from sexual violence in childhood. But those commitments are not often backed up by the level of national and international investments that are needed to address this problem, which is a growing problem. There is a lack of transparency in budget allocations. So across many countries, we don't see really clear picture of what is being invested to address this problem. And finally, there is too little investment in prevention, which is of course critical if we want to make a difference.
California, which is one of the wealthiest states, can only spend about $46,000 of its budget on prevention and $100 million on after harm happens. So that tells us why we aren't able to go to prevention. Dollars need to be poured into this, all of our resources and work. This is our future with children, and we have to start moving that needle.
I often talk about it as like sometimes it's like we're fighting for scraps versus trying to make the pie bigger. And so I think that there's also a need to evolve as a field and think big about what's possible.
The labels are such a hindrance where everyone wants to put their logo and their flags on it. And yet that's the game we're playing, and such a nonsense. So how can we elevate the discussion about the cause and the mission we fight for rather than promoting ourselves?
We need sorely to create these really, if you will, weird collaborations between technologists and software developers and scientists and survivors and children and decision makers, thinking much more profoundly about how can we harness radical new tools. For example, we have been investing in really never done before academic research that uses technology on the dark web to understand the pathways of abuse.
But the most exciting thing, I think, for me would be to see a new generation of leaders who pave the path to continue to fight against sexual violence.
What I'd love to see, is obviously a world without violence, a world where there's accountability when a child or a youth athlete comes forward, they are believed.
What really gives me hope is that we all have a shared value. We all want to protect children. There's nobody who's against us. So the hope that we have is how can we rally our partners so they can feel the confidence that we can do this together. it's within our reach. Because nobody's going to push back on reducing sexual violence in children. But we just need to make sure that we can put in place the right ingredients to fully remove this problem for all.
We should be focusing on ending violence against children, and certainly ending sexual violence against children. We have to stop saying reducing or making it less acceptable. There are many things that were perfectly acceptable 20 years ago, which are unacceptable now. And we can do this.